The 2021 NHL playoffs have arrived, and last time around, our predictions were god-awful. Plus, I also made last year's video before the actual format was announced, so not only did I make terrible predictions, but I looked like a clown. So this year, I want to go all in and attempt to make the most accurate predictions I possibly can. At the time I'm writing this, some series have already been confirmed, so I've had a bit more time to consider my selections. We'll also go division by division to make things organized. With that all out of the way, let's get started with the East Division. First, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins taking on the New York Islanders. Now, obviously, 2 years ago, many can remember the Islanders sweeping the Penguins in round 1, so this time around, Pittsburgh wants their revenge. Crosby's honestly looked like a borderline MVP candidate and has really helped the Pens remain consistent threats in the East Division. The sudden emergence of, yes, Cody Ceci and Michael Matheson have also made the Penguins extremely unpredictable, as you never know who will step up to the plate. With the Islanders, weeks before, you could have argued would have strangled the Penguins, but as of late, the team's been on a slight decline. Varlamov's looked absolutely amazing, but at times the team struggled overall. I think this series goes close, however, I believe the Penguins get their revenge, defeating the Islanders in 6 games. Our other matchup is Washington versus Boston, and with Boston, their trade deadline acquisitions have really helped them out, specifically Taylor Hall, who's helped bolster the Bruins' top 6, making them extremely deadly when red hot. But the thing that really makes me excited for this matchup is that it's hard-nosed Bruins hockey versus a Caps team that is loaded with physical weapons. Dowd, Hathaway, Chara, and yes, Tom Wilson will allow the Caps to use their big bodies to create separation. In my opinion, they're built for playoff hockey. However, the thing that concerns me with Washington is the goalie situation. As if Samsonov plays, I wonder how he'll be able to handle postseason play, and if Vanecek plays, I wonder how he'll translate his success into the postseason. And even after watching the last few Bees Caps games, it's kind of made me question who I actually think will win the series. But after careful consideration, I'm gonna go with perhaps an upset and pick the Bruins to beat the Capitals in 7 games, setting ourselves up for a Penguins-Bruins second round matchup. And honestly, this too can go either way. Both would match up extremely well against one another, and it would be interesting to see the two face off. Pittsburgh is a very high offensive team, and I do think that continues into the postseason. A thing to point out, however, is that Boston's scoring depth is insane. I believe a year or two ago, I saw a stat stating that 26 different Bruins players put up a goal in the Bruins playoff run. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just nuts. But as a lot of people know, the Penguins seem to have that magic come the playoffs, and I gotta stick with my gut on this one. I have the Penguins advancing to the Final 4 in 7 games. Now, let's go to the Central Division. First, we have the Carolina Hurricanes versus the Nashville Predators, and I think this is closer than a lot of people suspect, strictly because of one man, UC Saros. He's been absolutely electric and a treat to watch for the Predators this season, and after starting off cold, he blossomed into an elite starting netminder, and is perhaps the biggest reason Nashville is where they're at right now. With that being said, I also think that's the only way they'll have a chance to advance. If Saros remains hot, the Preds have a shot, but Carolina's firepower is lethal, and they have amazing depth on both ends. Now, if Nedeljkovic plays, he'll have similar expectations. However, he's been perhaps even better than Saros at times. It's a battle of young future stars in net, and I think Carolina will win the battle, taking down the Predators in 6 games. Similar to this series, the Battle of Florida will also be a lot tighter, as the Panthers aren't to be taken lightly. They've had a boatload of guys emerge as depth goal scorers. Verhaeghe and Duclair have been nice additions, as well as the acquisition of Sam Bennett from Calgary. As Flames fans, myself included, can tell you, if you thought Sam was good in the regular season, watch out for playoff Sam Bennett. With Florida, if Bob can remain solid, they have a chance. It also helps that Kucherov and Stammer are just now returning from injury, so they may take some time to get back into the swing of things. And actually, the Panthers have been pretty good against the Lightning this season. That being said, we know how good of a team Tampa is, but I'm going with the upset and picking the Panthers in 7 games. That leaves us with Carolina versus Florida, and I think that despite the Panthers' upset over Tampa, Carolina will put a hole on their run, winning in 6. I think once Nedeljkovic gets hot, he'll get into a groove, and although the Panthers could easily take this series as well, I have a bit more faith in Carolina. They move on to the Final 4. Now that 2 divisions are out of the way, let's shift to the north, and we'll start with the Maple Leafs and the Canadiens. This series personally is going to be awesome. If Price plays, that is. He's expected to return in time for the playoffs, and if he does, I do think the Canadiens stand a bit more of a chance. The only thing that worries me about the Maple Leafs is their goaltending. If Anderson starts, he may be extremely rough, playing for just the first time in 2 months a few days ago. And if Campbell plays, he could get them past a round, but I don't know about the entire postseason. I still have the Maple Leafs in, we'll say, 6 games, just because Montreal will give them a hard time. Edmonton and Winnipeg I also think will be pretty simple as well. That is, if Winnipeg plays as we expect them to play, as they haven't been too hot as of late. They've struggled to produce at times, and Hellebuck's proven he is breakable, and the team has overall been in the slump. Edmonton, on the other hand, has a red-hot Connor McDavid who can change an entire course of a series, and if they roll with Mike Smith, he's proven he's a playoff caliber netminder. With that being said, I think the Oilers take down Winnipeg in 5, leaving a lot of questions for the Jets to answer, which leaves us with McDavid versus Matthews in perhaps the most anticipated matchup of the postseason so far. This can go down to the wire, perhaps a Game 7 overtime thriller. It's that close. But again, to me, it's who does Toronto play in net? At the time of recording, we really don't know, and that worries me. Jack Campbell having limited experience could hurt here, but then again, I have Nedeljkovic and Jari moving on, so that really shouldn't matter. What matters to me in this case is both teams finish. Both have struggled to consistently close out games in postseason past, Edmonton with the Ducks and the Leafs with the Bruins. This was extremely hard as both teams have massive scoring prowess, but I do think it's time for McDavid to prove he's on a path to greatness. I think the Oilers barely edge out the Maple Leafs in 7 games in, we'll say, overtime. And if they can do that, they're a serious threat at that point for the Stanley Cup. One more division to go, and that's the West Division. We'll start with the Avalanche and Blues, and I think this may be one of the most easiest to predict to some, but you gotta give St. Louis some credit. They've been extremely hot lately, and Binnington is once again been on a tear, but they're also running into a boiling hot Avalanche team that has firepower on nearly every single line. The Blues, like mentioned, have looked extremely competitive as of late, so I don't think this is a blowout, but I think it's sadly just a bad case of misfortune. I think the Avalanche win this one in 5 games. Don't be surprised if this goes 6 or even 7 though. Finally, we have the Golden Knights and the Minnesota Wild, and this could go down to the wire. No, not because I'm hoping the Wild win it all this year, but because the Wild give me the vibes of a team that can really go on a Cinderella run. They've had one of their best years in recent memory, and the emergence of Kirill Kaprizov has really elevated this team into star status. Talbot has actually looked solid at times, and the team has looked really dominant when on their game. The Wild even have a winning record against the Knights as well, but there's one guy that always seems to destroy Minnesota. That's Mark Stone, and both he and Fleury can really change the tide of this series. Even though I'm hoping for the upset, I'm going Knights in 6, making them move on to face the Avalanche, and this is where I think things get interesting. This will be must-watch hockey. The Knights and Avs play well against one another, and it'll be a battle. However, I think it's a battle the Avalanche barely win. I know I predicted the Avalanche to go far last year, but this year, it's promising. The Avs' depth intrigues me, and they're built for both now and the future. I think now's the perfect time for them to attempt a run, and this is the year. They defeat the Knights in 7, which now leaves 4 teams. Since the Avs are the President's Trophy winners, they're the number 1 seed. Carolina's followed up by them at the 2 seed, Pittsburgh is the 3 seed, and Edmonton is the 4 seed. Thanks to the Final 4 seeding, this gives us an Oilers Avalanche and a Penguins Hurricanes series, and in this year's Stanley Cup Final, I believe we'll see Sidney Crosby and the Penguins face off against none other than the Colorado Avalanche. I have Colorado taking Edmonton down in 6. I think McDavid is so close to taking this team to the Cup, but I think Edmonton's 1 or 2 pieces away from getting over the hump. As for the Pens, they win in 6 as well. I think if it is Nedeljkovic, he loses his touch, and if it's Mrazek or Reimer, I think the Pens will simply outmuscle the Canes. Now, this leaves us with Crosby versus Buddy McKinnon, a goalie matchup of Jari and Grubauer, and 2 teams with guys up and down the lineup left standing. It's definitely an interesting and entertaining final, which I think could happen, but Unlike last season, I have to stick with my gut, and it's telling me that this year, Crosby and the Pens hoist one last cup. I think the Penguins, backed by their veteran core of Malkin, Letang, and Crosby, can hoist another Stanley Cup. Why? Experience. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but this Avalanche team is still fairly young and on the come up, and the Pens have been here before. I think they win it in 6 games. Knowing my luck, none of this will happen, and some random team will end up winning it all, but that's what makes both the NHL and these predictions so much fun, as all it takes is one goal, save, or upset to occur to change the entire playoffs and to prove you're a legit contender for the Stanley Cup.